Greetings. My name is Scott Layton, and I write this as an American one who is as deeply troubled by Donald Trump and his administration as many of you are in Europe and the rest of the world. I didn't vote for the man, but nonetheless, I share the frustration many of you feel regarding the current state of affairs. I also created this video as a show of deep respect and support for the European Union, its member states, and its vision of human, social, and civil rights. You've always held that mantle since you so heroically began in the destructive wake of World War II. You forged a better path than the world has ever seen, based on peace, shared prosperity, and the protection of all. You have always been more free than America, especially in this age of billionaires, voter suppression, and full-out assaults on civil rights. The world needs you now to take up the mantle of protector of global human rights and democracy and light that path with your wisdom, compassion, and reason. If you do not rise, the rest of the world risks falling back into the dark shadows of the past, those very shadows your forebears sought to banish. Imperialism, colonialism, slavery, and man's inhumanity to man. If Europe falters, its entire mission risks failure, and the world will once again be consumed by the very wars, poverty, and threats, not just to democracy, but to our survival against climate change that your project was designed to prevent. We need you, Europe. This compendium video to Forging a New Path, the EU in the 21st Century, expands upon my original argument. It's not just about geopolitical strategy, it's about moral obligation. Europe's achievements in human dignity, social justice, and civil rights are not just regional successes, they are a beacon for humanity. With the US retreating from global leadership, the EU must lead not for power, but for principle. The European Union was born not from conquest, but from conscience. In the ashes of World War II, after fascism, genocide, and untold suffering, European leaders sought a new path. The 1951 European Coal and Steel Community, ECSC, was more than an economic pact. It was a peace project. By integrating industries once used for war, future conflict between France and Germany became unthinkable. The Treaty of Rome, 1957, expanded this vision, creating the European Economic Community, EEC. But even then, the economic project was a means to a higher moral end, a Europe defined by democracy, human rights, and social justice. Europe's expansion after the Cold War, welcoming post-communist nations, was not mere geopolitics. It was a moral affirmation. Prosperity and freedom are not Western privileges but universal rights. The EU's core principles enshrined in the Charter of Fundamental Rights 2000 include dignity, right to life, freedom from torture and bodily autonomy, freedoms, expression, assembly, and religion, equality, gender equality, and anti-discrimination, solidarity, workers' rights, healthcare, and social support, citizenship, voting, and freedom of movement, justice, fair trials, and consumer protections. These rights contrast sharply with the American model. While the US champions individual liberty, the EU prioritizes collective dignity. It's not just freedom from oppression, but freedom to live a decent life. Europe's achievements are more than aspirational, they are operational, woven into daily life. The European Court of Human Rights, ECHR, has set global precedents, from LGBTQ+ rights to press freedom and asylum protections. In contrast, the US Supreme Court, now ideologically polarized, has rolled back rights, notably in Dobbs versus Jackson, which overturned federal abortion protections. Universal health care is a right across the EU. In Germany, France, and the Nordics, citizens receive high-quality care regardless of income. In contrast, the US, despite spending more per capita than any other country, leaves millions uninsured. Education is equitable and accessible. Public universities in Germany and the Netherlands often cost less per year than a single textbook in the US. Privacy protections under the EU's General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, are the world's gold standard. US tech giants, by contrast, have faced repeated scandals over surveillance and data misuse. Worker protections, including paid parental leave, vacation time, and limits on exploitation, are fundamental in Europe but rare in the American gig economy. Mortality rates, life expectancy, and child well-being consistently favor the EU. Life expectancy, EU average of 81 years versus 76 in the US. Infant mortality, 3.4 per 1,000 live births in the EU versus 5.4 in the US. Poverty rate, 9% in the EU versus 17% in the US. Education outcomes, Finland, Estonia, and the Netherlands routinely outperform the US in PISA rankings. These achievements are not merely economic, they are moral victories, affirming that societies can flourish when they prioritize people over profits. The EU's leadership also faces its greatest test at its borders. Since the 2015 refugee crisis, millions fleeing war, poverty, and persecution have sought sanctuary in Europe. While far-right populists, from Viktor Orban in Hungary to Marine Le Pen in France, exploit fears of cultural displacement, the EU's moral compass remains clear: asylum is a human right. Germany's decision to accept over 1 million Syrian refugees under Angela Merkel's leadership exemplified Kantian duty, treating people as ends, not means. In contrast, the US under Trump slashed refugee admissions to historic lows. Yet, Europe's record is not spotless. The drowning of migrants in the Mediterranean and the harsh conditions in camps like Moria expose the fragility of moral commitment. Europe must reconcile its ideals with practical governance, ensuring solidarity does not falter under political pressure. The EU's moral leadership faces internal threats. Far-right populism is resurgent. Parties like Germany's AfD, Italy's Brothers of Italy, and France's National Rally challenge the EU's inclusive vision. Brexit was not just a political rupture, but an ideological rejection of European solidarity. Post-Brexit Britain's economic stagnation and labor shortages are a cautionary tale. Democratic backsliding in Hungary and Poland threatens judicial independence, press freedom, and minority rights. Can the EU uphold its moral leadership while its own house remains divided? Yes, but only through resolute action. Strengthening democratic institutions, protecting courts and the press, combating disinformation, coordinating cross-border efforts, promoting social inclusion, addressing inequality, especially in post-industrial regions vulnerable to populism. The EU's moral achievements are not just for Europeans, they are a template for global progress. On climate change, the EU leads with the Green Deal, aiming for carbon neutrality by 2050. The US, meanwhile, remains divided, with policy swinging wildly between administrations. On peace and diplomacy, the EU facilitated the Iran nuclear deal and supports Ukraine's defense against Russian aggression. On digital rights, the GDPR has inspired similar legislation worldwide, from Brazil's LGPD to California's CCPA. In a world where authoritarianism rises from China's surveillance state to Russia's militarism, the EU's leadership is imperative. As the US turns inward, Europe must turn outward. The European Union today is more than an economic bloc. It is a moral project proving that prosperity, democracy, and human dignity are mutually reinforcing. To lead the democratic world, the EU must embrace its Renaissance spirit, courage in adversity, wisdom in policymaking, and compassion for the vulnerable. Yes, the path ahead is fraught with challenges: populism, inequality, geopolitical instability. But history shows that Europe thrives when it leads with its values, not despite them. If not Europe, who? If not now, when? Yet, for the EU to truly lead the democratic world, it must confront its own vulnerabilities. Democratic backsliding in Hungary and Poland, the mistreatment of migrants at external borders, and economic disparities between northern and southern member states challenge the narrative of unity and moral leadership. Moreover, while the EU excels as a normative power, its influence is constrained by limited strategic cohesion. Without a unified foreign policy or robust military capacity, moral leadership risks remaining aspirational rather than operational. The world cannot be led by principles alone. Leadership demands the ability to defend those principles against rising authoritarianism. Furthermore, while the EU stands as a beacon, it does not shine alone. Nations such as Canada, Japan, and Australia, alongside democratic movements in the global south, share in the defense of liberal democracy. A truly effective EU leadership must embrace multilateralism, not just as a value but as a strategy, working alongside global allies to create a resilient democratic front. Only by addressing these internal contradictions and embracing cooperative leadership can the European Union fulfill its historic promise, not merely as a regional success story, but as the cornerstone of a renewed global democratic order. As the philosopher Hannah Arendt wrote, "The sad truth is that most evil is done by people who never make up their minds to be good or evil." Europe must now decide, will it lead or will it watch as the democratic world fragments? The answer will shape not just its own future, but the future of humanity itself. The time for moral leadership is now. Europe must rise. Thank you for watching. Our channel, known as the Renaissance Spirit, is dedicated to the pursuits of a just, equitable, and humanitarian world. Video topics encompass areas including history, politics, religion, personal development, society, culture, social and environmental justice, and other topics of liberal arts and sciences, including ancient Rome and the Roman Empire, which is a great comparison and contrast of the modern world. Topics perfect for the true modern polymath. Living the Renaissance spirit means engaging with history, not as a distant past, but as a living dialogue, constantly informing and enriching our present, and the Renaissance spirit is a reminder of our dialogue with the future, our progeny and posterity, our legacy. Will we grant them a future free from fear of climate change and tales of the end of democracy? Will they admonish us for our sins and omissions, or will they remember us fondly as saviors of humanity and the natural world? The Renaissance ushered in a golden age, and the pursuit of knowledge. Knowledge both lost to time and yet to be discovered. It gave birth to the Enlightenment and the Age of Reason. The Enlightenment gave us reason, rights, and revolution. Today, the European Union stands as its greatest inheritor. Will it rise to the challenge, or let the lights dim once more? Europe's choices today will decide whether Europe's next chapter is one of enlightenment or another dark age. Oswald Spengler, German mathematician, philosopher, and fellow polymath, famously theorized that civilizations rise through creativity and fall through complacency. This reference is offered in situ, as a reflection on the challenges facing societies, rather than an endorsement of Spengler's broader worldview. While his critique of cultural stagnation has at times been misappropriated by far-right movements, Spengler himself rejected authoritarianism and racial ideology, openly criticizing Nazism. His observations, drawn from historical analysis rather than political doctrine, do not represent the vision of progress, inclusivity, and resilience that defines the European Union today. For Europe, decline is not destiny, nor is creativity inevitably lost. The EU stands at a crossroads, not as a civilization in retreat, but as one poised to spark a new renaissance of leadership and values, proving that history's arc bends not by fate, but by choice. Toynbee taught us that civilizations collapse not from external threats, but from within, when they fail to respond to crises. Europe now faces its greatest challenge. Will it rise to meet it or retreat into division? Kant's moral imperative reminds us, if Europe abandons its leadership in human rights and democracy, what universal law will fill the void? Authoritarianism? Exploitation? Or will Europe stand as the Enlightenment's last, best hope? Nietzsche cautioned that when societies abandon their guiding values, the will to power fills the void. Europe's choice is stark: lead with reason and rights, or watch the shadows of nationalism rise once more. Fukuyama declared the end of history with the triumph of liberal democracy. Yet history has returned with a vengeance. Will Europe fulfill Hegel's vision of freedom, or will the cycle reset? Embracing truth, knowledge, and an understanding and compassion for humanity and our shared history opens up the world to each of us, individually, and improves all of humanity, affording us the opportunity to be better stewards of the earth and to each other. The Renaissance spirit, more than just a philosophy or style, but a style for living, learning, growing, and thinking. Please subscribe, turn on notifications, and share and take our quiz next to see if you're a Renaissance spirit. Live the Renaissance spirit. History has not died, only our understanding of it. Coincidence or destiny? The continent that gave us classical Greece and Rome also gave us empire, colonialism, slavery, industrialization, and genocide before finally forging peace. What will it bring next?